For the longest time, I believed I had everything I ever wanted. A loving husband, a circle of friends I trusted with my life, a home that felt like safety wrapped in sunshine. My name is Sophia, and if you'd met me 6 months ago, you would have envied me. Daniel, my husband, was the kind of man people admired. He was intelligent without arrogance, charming without effort. In public, he held my hand like a promise. At home, he kissed my forehead before leaving for work and always brought me my favorite tea when I had rough days. We weren't perfect, no one is, but he was my person. At least, I thought he was. Then there were my girls, Rachel and Lena. Rachel had been my best friend since high school, the keeper of my secrets, the one who knew the names of every boy I ever loved. Lena was a newer addition, sharp, witty, and stylish in a way that made heads turn. We met at work, and she quickly became someone I confided in during lunch breaks and weekend brunches. The three of us were inseparable, matching bracelets, spontaneous girls' nights, inside jokes layered over glasses of wine. Looking back, it all feels like a beautifully staged lie. I first noticed something off during a dinner party at our place. Daniel had cooked his famous grilled salmon, and Lena and Rachel were both there, laughing, sipping wine, sharing stories that spiraled into laughter. I sat back, watching the people I loved most smile under warm lights. But then I saw it. Rachel's hand lingered a moment too long on Daniel's shoulder. Lena laughed a little too hard at his joke. Daniel's eyes flicked toward them more than they flicked toward me. It was subtle, like a shift in atmosphere no one else could feel. But I did. I told myself I was being paranoid. A week later, I called Rachel to vent about a stressful meeting, and she didn't pick up. Not unusual. What was unusual was Lena's text that popped up an hour later. Hope your meeting went okay. Let me know if you need to talk. I hadn't told her about it. Only Rachel knew. A chill crept up my spine, but again I silenced it. Maybe they talked. Maybe it was nothing. I started noticing patterns. Rachel canceling plans last minute. Lena becoming increasingly available. Daniel, once so present, had grown distant, less affectionate, more distracted. I'd ask how his day was, and his answers felt rehearsed, clipped. One night, I leaned in to kiss him, and he turned slightly, my lips grazing his cheek instead. Sorry, babe. Just tired, he mumbled. I smiled and nodded, but inside, something cracked. Still, I clung to the idea that I was imagining things. These were my people. My husband. My best friends. The thought of betrayal was too ugly, too cruel to entertain. So I buried it under routine, morning coffees, weekend errands, casual texts filled with emojis and exclamation points. But doubt has a way of festering. One night, while folding laundry, I found a delicate gold earring wedged between the couch cushions. It wasn't mine. I held it between my fingers, staring at its familiar design. Rachel had worn these at my birthday dinner. I remember because I'd complimented them. The air around me stilled, thick with the kind of silence that screams. I placed the earring in my drawer without a word. I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I needed more than a gut feeling and a stray earring. I needed the truth, not pieces of it, but the full, sharp-edged thing. So I waited. I watched. I smiled through dinners and texts, noted glances, tracked absences, and kept my emotions behind a carefully polished mask. I began to feel like a stranger in my own life, floating above conversations, dissecting moments like a detective rather than a wife or friend. And yet, despite the quiet ache of suspicion, a part of me still hoped I was wrong, that this was just exhaustion, overthinking, a spiral of insecurity. But deep down, I knew the illusion was cracking. And once something begins to crack, it doesn't take much for it to shatter. The day had started like any other. The sky was gray, the kind of dull overcast that made the city feel slower, quieter. I left work early. Nothing dramatic, just a canceled meeting and a mounting headache that made fluorescent lights unbearable. All I wanted was a hot shower and silence. But silence has a way of revealing what noise often hides. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Daniel's car already parked. Odd. He usually worked later than I did. I grabbed my bag and quietly let myself in, hoping to slip past him unnoticed and curl up in bed. The house was dim, curtains half drawn, the hallway eerily still. My heels echoed softly against the hardwood as I crossed into the living room. Then I heard it. Laughter. A woman's. Muffled, breathy, familiar. Followed by a second, slightly deeper, lower-pitched. Also familiar. I froze. My heart began to pound, dull and heavy against my ribcage. The laughter came again, clearer this time, followed by the creak of a bed I knew too well.
No.
No, no, no. I moved like a ghost down the hallway, each step slow and deliberate. My fingers curled tightly around the doorknob to our bedroom. I didn't need to open it. I already knew.
But I did anyway.
The door opened with a soft click, and the illusion I had so carefully preserved shattered in an instant. There they were. Daniel, Rachel, Lena, tangled in my sheets. The bed I had shared with him for 6 years, now defiled by the very people I'd trusted with everything. For a moment, they didn't even see me. They were too wrapped up in each other, too consumed by lust and betrayal to notice the world collapsing around them. When Daniel's eyes finally met mine, his expression collapsed into something unreadable, part shame, part disbelief. Rachel scrambled for the blanket, her face paling. Lena didn't bother to hide. She just stared at me, lips parted, eyes sharp and unapologetic. No one spoke. The silence roared louder than any scream ever could. I felt nothing and everything at once. My body buzzed with heat, but my mind was eerily calm. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Tears, accusations, screaming matches. But now that it was real, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared. I can explain, Daniel said, voice rough, as if the words were caught in his throat. No, I replied. My voice didn't shake. You can't. Rachel opened her mouth, then shut it. Her eyes welled up with tears, but they felt manufactured, practiced. I'd seen her cry before. This wasn't the same. And Lena smirked. Just the tiniest curve of her lips. A dare, almost. As if to say, what are you going to do about it? I turned and walked away. Not a word more. Not a glance back. My legs carried me out the door, down the driveway, and into the street, where I gasped for air like I'd just surfaced from drowning. It was raining now, light, cold drops that clung to my skin and hair. I stood there for minutes, maybe hours. Time had lost its shape. Betrayal has a way of warping everything: memory, identity, truth. The faces of Daniel, Rachel, and Lena swirled in my mind like ghosts refusing to leave. Each one of them had held a piece of me. My love, my trust, my vulnerability. And now, each of them had twisted those pieces into weapons. I drove without direction, the city blurring past my window. My phone buzzed, calls from Daniel, messages from Rachel. Apologies. Excuses. Lies dressed as confessions. I didn't respond. I couldn't go home. Not yet.
Home was no longer mine.
That bed, those sheets, the walls, everything had been tainted, violated. So I checked into a small hotel, the kind with generic artwork and quiet hallways. I peeled off my soaked clothes, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. But beneath the heartbreak, beneath the devastation, something else was stirring. Not rage.
Not sorrow.
Resolve. They thought they had broken me. They thought their betrayal would be the end of my story. But they were wrong. This was only the beginning. Grief is loud. But revenge, it's quiet. After the storm of betrayal, I didn't spiral. I didn't smash things or send rage-fueled texts. I went silent. Deliberate. Focused. Because what they took from me wasn't just love, it was dignity. And I intended to reclaim every piece. For the first few days, I disappeared. I shut off my phone, took time off work, sat in silence and listened to my pain, to my rage, to the truth I'd spent so long denying. I journaled until my fingers ached, writing not just what happened, but who they really were. I studied them like case files. Daniel, the calculated liar. Rachel, the backstabber with a tear-streaked smile. Lena, the opportunist cloaked in charm. By the time I turned my phone back on, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in on 3 people tangled in betrayal. I was sharper now. Calmer.
Strategic.
I didn't want to destroy them in a blaze of drama. I wanted to unravel them, one thread at a time. I started with Lena. She worked in marketing at the same company as me. There were rules, strict ones, about interoffice relationships, especially with clients. I knew she'd been sneaking around with one of our biggest clients on the side, using Daniel as a cover story when she needed excuses.
Sloppy. Risky.
Easy to expose. I submitted an anonymous tip to HR, complete with time-stamped emails and screenshots she'd carelessly forwarded to our shared drive. I knew they'd investigate. I also knew Lena's charm wouldn't get her out of this one. Within a week, she was called into a disciplinary meeting. 2 days later, she was gone. No farewell email. No goodbyes. Just erased. Next came Rachel. She had a fiancé, Eli. Sweet, gentle, the kind of man who believed in brunch dates and handwritten notes. We'd spoken often. He'd once told me I reminded him of his sister. Warm, steady. I used to smile at that. Now I felt sick thinking about how close he'd stood to betrayal without ever knowing. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't have to. Instead, I sent him one photo, taken from an old dinner party. Rachel, leaning a little too close to Daniel, lips near his ear, the moment forever frozen in digital proof. I didn't include a message. Just the photo. Let the silence say the rest. 3 days later, Rachel's social media accounts went dark. A week after that, mutual friends started whispering about a canceled engagement. No dramatic fallout. Just implosion from the inside out.
And Daniel?
For him, I saved something special. He prided himself on appearances. His image was everything: polished LinkedIn profile, curated Instagram posts, reputation as the devoted husband. I knew the company he worked for monitored employee conduct closely, especially for those involved in public campaigns. So, I crafted an anonymous blog post. It was fictional, of course. Inspired by real events. The story of a woman betrayed not just by her husband, but by her friends. It was raw, powerful, and laced with subtle, damning details that only Daniel's co-workers would recognize. The post went viral in our city's niche circles within days. Not explosive, but insidious. Questions started surfacing in his office. Rumors spiraled. Campaigns he once led with confidence were reassigned. His name lost its shine. His voice, once loud, grew quieter in conference calls. Eventually, someone in HR called him in.
I don't know what was said.
But I know this. He stopped posting pictures of his perfect life after that. I never confronted him. He reached out, of course he did. Emails. Voicemails. A letter in my mailbox that began with, "You didn't have to do this." But I did. Because silence is a language. And mine spoke louder than his excuses ever could. Months passed. I moved out of the house. Sold my share without a word. I started over: smaller apartment, new sheets, different routines. I kept to myself. Built boundaries that held like steel. Therapy helped. So did solitude. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror again. The same woman stared back at me, but this time, I recognized her. Not broken. Not bitter. Reborn. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge wrapped in fire and fury. I'd already won. Because they had taken something precious from me, but I took back something far more powerful. Myself. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.